Welcome to Who's Culture. I'm Gal, and we have Nolan here. Nolan.
Hi, everybody. I wanted to be all professional, but my producer and co-host decided to be all goofy, so that's how we'll start the show out. Welcome back. We've had a little hiatus. Gal was on vacation. I was on a... What's the opposite of a sabbatical?
It wasn't self-care?
No, it was more work. So, whatever, yeah.
Just call it work.
Yeah, well, there you go. Well, speaking of trying times, I went out last night and did go for a little self-care. One of my cousins took me out for a little birthday treat, and we went to dinner and a movie, and the dinner was great. But then the movie, and he let me choose the movie. It was Planet of the Apes, the new one, War for Planet of the Apes. And I have never in my life been more traumatized after watching a movie than watching this film. And we go to the movies for an escape. We go to the movies to get away from life, and especially when you do the type of work that Gal and I do, it is very key to have that escape. But I was not allowed that escape with this movie, and in fact, it was the exact opposite. It was hell, and I will explain why. Now, if you know anything about American history, black folks were called monkeys and apes, porch monkeys, the whole 9 yards. And in this film, you'll see monkeys hung up on stakes with scars all over them, dead, just like black people, were lynched during slavery and Jim Crow. In this film, I'm spoiler alert, by the way. It came out a little while ago, but I'll just say that just to be nice to y'all. So also in this film, there's a monkey that is a bit slower-minded than the rest of them. And there's this one scene where that monkey looks through the binoculars, but he puts them on the wrong way. And then the other monkey's like, no, you put them on the other way. So like this, the whole ignorant ape, monkey, black person narrative. Caesar, who's the leader of the apes, he gets captured and enters a prison. And this prison has these soldiers whipping the monkeys. The leader, he's basically like the humans' Hitler. He has all power over the humans' soldiers. And he tells Caesar, get back to work. And ironically, they're building a wall because apparently Woody's character is such a horrible person that his ex-soldiers are coming back to attack him. So he's trying to build a wall, and he's having the monkeys do it for him. You can look at Mr. Trump and his wall, and he wants some Mexicans to build it. And so he tells Caesar, get back to work. And Caesar's like, no. And then Caesar refuses. And one of the monkeys who is in the command of the humans, and another soldier pins Caesar down. And then another soldier starts whipping Caesar. And at that point, I had to close my eyes. I honestly started crying because that triggered intergenerational trauma on a visual scale that I've never experienced before in my life. I started going back hundreds of years to when we were too quote unquote uppity, if we weren't doing what the master told us to do, and they started to whip us until we did do what the master wanted us to do. And there's also a scene where Woody Harrelson's character stands on the podium and he's shaving his head with a knife, all hardcore military style, shaving cream. And all the soldiers below are yelling allegiance to him, really like a Hitler. And a makeshift American flag is hung from the podium. And then after they finish their yelling and screaming, the national anthem starts playing. And the prison doors get unlocked and opened, and then the soldiers come in to where the monkeys are. And then they just start whipping all the monkeys while the anthem's playing. And if you know what the actual anthem was written, why it was written, in part, it was written because, we're celebrating the murder of black slaves. So I'm watching this. I'm seeing these apes who were thought, in the movie, of course, thought to be lesser than the humans, subhuman, and the national anthem's playing, and these apes are getting whipped, and it was just amazing how hard over the head they were trying to beat this into me. It was too obvious that there were too many correlations. Too many correlations with black people and apes in this movie and the black struggle and everything. And there was a fight in the movie between two apes in the prison, just for the hell of it, which is instigated by the guards, the soldiers, which, just like slavery with the whole Mandingo thing, they had us fight each other just for the slave master's amusement. And if you don't believe me and are lazy, just watch Django Unchained. They have a couple scenes of just that, or one or two scenes of just that. And there's also a reference where Harrelson talks to Caesar again in his office, and he's talking about how, I don't know if you know what history is, Caesar, but this is a major moment in history, just like Custer and Sitting Bull. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding? And just, I don't know if it was a scene before that or that exact, the same scene, but one of them, it was a scene before that. One of the monkeys were talking to the other monkeys that were trying to find their way through this post-apocalyptic world to find this leader that is Woody Harrelson. And one of them was saying, yeah, we didn't know if they were coming back to kill all of us and finish us all off. And that's native genocide to a T. That phrase has been said so many times throughout the history of Turtle Island, aka now is the United States. And it was nonstop. It was banging it into my head, and it was a concentration camp like setting with this prison that Caesar was in. And this is and I talk about sometimes on this show and in general about being outside of the Matrix. the farther you are outside the Matrix, the harder it is to enjoy the most normal things, just like this movie. So most people don't know this, but the black people were in the Jewish Holocaust. There were about 20 to 25,000 black citizens in Germany that were stripped of their citizenship and put into camps and actually segregated from the Jewish people, and in many cases treated worse than the Jewish people. We had to clean out the gas chambers right after they were used. We had to assist in Dr. Mengele's and all those demonic Nazis' experiments, and then they would kill us. So there was no record of us, helping out or even being there. And to this day, we haven't received a dime in reparations for that, even though the mini tangent, some German soccer teams were taking a knee, and I honestly took offense to that because, hey, Germany, you going to apologize for what you did to us, or is it just the Jewish people? So looking at that movie with, us in a concentration camp, it's like setting, being whipped, and then at the end, again, spoiler alert, they end up blowing up the complex and, taking a victory and then getting to a new home, as they said in the movie, and it looked just like Africa. And I mean, the whole thing was putting my psyche through a ringer. I'll just say that much. And monkeys, Africa, back home, chains, whippings, beatings, lynchings, finishing, extermination. It was a lot. It was a lot. I did not. It was a well done movie in terms of the production, but like we said so many times on this show, so many shows and movies are well done, but they're very racist, and it doesn't give them an excuse for the quality of the cinematography and whatnot. And I even heard somebody laughing in the theater at the monkey that was a little slower than the others when he did something stupid. And I also remember the Woody Harrelson character, the leader of the humans. He kept talking to Caesar, saying that, you are impressive. You are impressive. You can talk. You have a lot of intelligence about yourself. You're unique. And it reminded me of that scene in Django Unchained where Leonardo DiCaprio said the words, "the exceptional nigger." We looking for that exceptional nigger, because the point being, well, most of us or all of us are pathetic. We're subhuman. We're monkeys. They literally put us in zoos. We were in concentration camps in Kenya, in South Africa, millions of us being killed and tortured in Germany. But yeah, there was so many correlations and matches and A meeting B, A black person, I get what you're trying to do, or trying to put under the surface where most people probably won't see it. But especially that thing about him being, Caesar being unique. And then I think of Tarantino, and we're going to talk about the Weinstein thing later on. There's a picture of Tarantino's hand on a black woman's behind, and you can see his face. I can't remember if you can see the black woman's face or not, but he's basically just completely sexualizing her in the picture. And Tarantino himself, he's a fetish for saying the N-word. He probably orgasms every time he says it or puts it in one of his films. And to have that, oh yeah, the exceptional nigger. And I can think of so many instances of that. I mean, you can think of Obama when he was called articulate. Frederick Douglass when Abraham Lincoln and Andrew Johnson humored him into thinking that he had some kind of political power before and after the Civil War. But that was my Thursday night, so I just wanted to get that off.
It was your Thursday night. We're only on Wednesday.
Tuesday night.
Are you in the future?
No, that's how traumatizing it was. I forget what day it was.
Now, I haven't seen it. I remember the controversy when it came out, when DeRay tweeted about it, and then Whoopi Goldberg snapped out, and he deleted all his tweets. I do want to state, though, that the history of Planet of the Apes has always been political. If you go through every single one of them, there has been some form of a debate that's been, at the time, the original film was based on what was incredibly controversial at the time, evolution. The sequel was then about the dangers of nuclear holocaust. The third was it was an allegory for persecuted immigrant families. And you can just go through each and every one of them. And from my understanding, just from basic reading on it, I haven't watched it again, is that was actually the point they were trying to get across. Exactly what you just said. Humanity and the issues within it, especially race-based. And the first one, of course, the first one of this series was about, not trusting science, things like that. But from what I've read on this one, it was trying to get to the allegory of both race and ethnicity relations in the U.S. and, of course, comparing it to Nazi Germany, which was the entire purpose of the film. From what I've read. Again, I haven't seen that one yet. I haven't had time. But that is where I'm at from it.
And that's the funny thing. I don't go to the movies that often because I have the same problem. I don't have the time. And that's the one I chose to see, and whoops.
Right.
That was a big mistake. But it is what it is. That just happens to be the worst experience that I've had watching a film in terms of the trauma of it, the intergenerational trauma of it, and bringing that to the surface. And it sucks because there's most of these movies or shows or plays, Thomas and Sally at the Marin Theater in Bay Area of California, showing until October 29th. Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings. Look it up if you don't know what I'm talking about. But that's the thing with entertainment. Most of it's racist or bigoted or sexist and homophobic, transphobic. And we're going to have on my very good friend, Jen Deerinwater. She is an incredible Native activist, writer, journalist. She's going to help us talk about the erasure and dehumanization of the LGBTQ community in Hollywood at about 3:15. And that's the thing. You watch these things and it is dehumanizing. If you have empathy for other people, and then if you are a person of color or a marginalized person, I always bring up Seinfeld because it's so popular. It's arguably, it's arguably the best sitcom ever. And in honesty and being fair, it may be the most popular sitcom of all time. I would say that, or I Love Lucy. But in all fairness, it's one of the most racist shows in the history of television. And I will say it's the most racist show of my lifetime. There are no people of color on that show. It's very rare, and when it does happen, we were caricatures or made fun of. There was one episode where Jerry tried to date a Native woman, and the second time he saw her in the episode, there was a totem pole that Kramer brought over, and Seinfeld was going, hey, hi, well, that joking thing. I don't want to do it myself, but making fun of Native spirituality. And of course, she was appalled. But then somehow at the end of the episode, she ends up liking him. Like, that Native women don't have any minds of their own. They can't decide what's a jerk from a good guy. They're,
that's women in general.
True.
On
That's
TV.
true. That's true. I'd just say Native women more than anybody, because they're rarely on TV, and when they are, they're made fun of. But that's the thing. Yeah, Seinfeld's the worst, and he has a new Netflix special out. I don't know what it's called. I don't care what it's called. But that's what we're dealing with here. Have you seen what's it called? B movie, or the B movie with Seinfeld?
I've never seen Seinfeld. I watched the first episode, it bored the shit out of me. I never watched it again.
Well, there was a movie he did.
Yeah, I don't like Seinfeld. I don't like him in anything.
Well, that's where we co-host the show together. Yeah. Well, there was this movie he did called B movie. And the only reason,
B as in BEE, the little B.
Yes.
I was working at Blockbuster then. I do remember that.
There you go. Well, the only reason I saw this movie was because my doctor's appointment ran long, and I was in the waiting room for an hour and a half. And children's movies are about an hour and a half. So this movie it's astounding. I'm just shocked that this exists. I'm not that racist things like this exist, but it was so on the nose in the movie. And I'm actually quoting a Twitter thread I made that I'll tweet in a minute. There's a synopsis of, okay, this white woman and him and the bee somehow meet and can understand each other. And they like each other, and some romance there. There's no sex scenes or anything, but it's like there's clear that they like each other in that way. More teaching of bestiality to children, Beauty and the Beast. In the movie, there is a pro-Christopher Columbus reference, of course, saying how Columbus, came to the New World and discovered it. And Seinfeld's character, his bee in the movie, B movie, he stumbles upon a conspiracy that humans have stolen their honey. Humans have stolen their way of life, stolen their land. So he takes them to court. And then what happens is he gets all lawyered up and I mean on his own. He turns into Johnny Cochran or Alan Dershowitz or something. I'm trying to think of a famous lawyer. And he's in the courtroom yelling at the judge saying, hey, you have stolen our bee culture. I'm just sitting back in this waiting room going, are you serious? He's actually being serious right now. And then he starts going, hey, you've stolen our land. and we've had enough. You humans have been just ravaging us bees for years and years. The dude makes a whole movie about the bees losing their culture and having their lives endangered because of humans. And the bees are in danger. And then he starts going on about, hey, you know what? We've had enough, and this is a direct quote, enough of living as honey slaves to the white man. Living as honey slaves to the white man, Jerry Seinfeld says, is a B&B movie. He's yelling at the judge again to return all the land humans have stolen from bees. Not making this up. Then he starts pressuring humans to stop using the likeness of bees, stop making fun of bees and their culture, stop calling them derogatory names, stop using their likeness to sell their cars or their honey or whatnot. Jeep Grand Cherokee, for example, native people, Cherokee, that is a nation. There are actual people that are still alive. And this movie I was stunned watching it. Like, I know racism exists in Hollywood. That's why the show exists.
It's incredibly significant in children's TV and movies, more so than anywhere else.
Now elaborate on that.
It helps in the socialization process. So if you sit down, and especially as an adult and somebody who is more aware of this type of thing, you'll start to see it in all children's TV and movie. Specifically movies, it's easy. The very first show we did, of course, was Disney, and it's easy to pick on Disney because there's so many high-rated, well-known examples. But you can see this in anything from SpongeBob to I've yet to see a children's movie that isn't got some form of racist, sexist bullshit behind it. And it has to do with the media conglomerates, and that's the idea, right, is to get that socialized norm into children's heads, because that's our culture. And it sounds horrible to say, but that is our culture. And you want to socialize them into their norms. And if it's too controversial, look at something like Beauty and the Beast, which is... I'm not even going to get into the whole aspect of it, but let's look at the last movie rendition that came out this year and the controversy of a man kissing another man, still in 2017, right? So if you go against that, it then can, it was completely banned in parts of Alabama as a children's movie. So it's really since race especially and gender and sexuality is so intertwined in our culture. It's intertwined in our children's media as well, because that's what helps teach them into and normalize this and desensitize them to our ideologies and our media. That's what it's not. It's, of course, its purpose is to entertain, but it's also to help shape the culture. And so that's why you're going to find it in every single. I've yet to find one that I can walk away and go, that one wasn't too bad. That doesn't mean I don't like any of them, as we've been talking about the entire time we do these shows. But I can still tear every one of them apart. I do it in my classroom all the time.
That's the tricky part, though, because there are a lot of these shows and movies that we like, but they're so harmful. I mean, do you have a line? Like, is there a line where you're like, all right, that's too much. I can't watch this.
Anything Disney is my line. But I do, yeah. I guess it depends on, I don't even necessarily know where the line is drawn. Like, I am just completely anti-Disney. But when it came to watching films with the kids that I help raise, there are certain times, especially when you're in that parental role, where it's like, just shut up, kid, watch whatever you want, because you want some quiet time. So I get that. Oh, I get that. I never personally watched the Disney films with them, but that doesn't mean they didn't see them. I've never seen Frozen, but they've seen it a million times. What I always tell, and whenever I do discuss this in different classes, is it's not about, banning children from something that is so normal in their culture, because that would actually make them an outcast, but having open discussions with them. Whether it's discussions about why in Lion King is it, the hyenas, why is it when you hear the hyenas you think of somebody who is black, or if you're going to watch, and I have never, again, this goes back to Pocahontas, but if your kids come home and they've seen it, even talk about that fucking song, Savages. What's wrong with this song? Having these open discussions, it's not about banning, and it's not about not letting children watch part of their culture. It's about being able to openly discuss it with them so that you can point it out, and they can, but you leave it to them to bring it up to you, and you'll be amazed at what they come up with, because we tend to think children are stupid, and of course they're learning all the time, but they're so much more intelligent than we give them credit for. If we let them talk, if we let them have a say.
And that's the problem.
Yeah.
I don't want to say we, but the powers that be, I did not mean that to rhyme, but the powers that be are the ones diluting our children's mind with this very harmful entertainment. And
right, because it's part of indoctrination. That's the whole point.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it comes, socialization is one aspect of it, and then indoctrination just goes right with that. You want them to have, this American exceptionalism, all of that. And so, we've talked about the education system before. It all gets put into that. And parents are going to fall into it, and individuals from certain groups, we all are going to, there's going to be things. Aladdin was my favorite movie, even as an adult, until I sat down and it just hit me one day at how fucking racist the theme song was, and then kind of looking into it, and it was like, oh, this is bad. And it's still to this day the hardest one for me not to watch if it comes on somewhere, because it's that's the one that I did like. And I can't give you any reason why. I don't know. When I was a kid, it was just the one I liked. I hated Little Mermaid. I just remember coming home in the 4th grade, shows my age, when Little Mermaid came out, and asking my mom why this dumb redheaded bitch gave away her voice for a man. And my mom was like, "That's my girl." I'll never forget it. I probably didn't say bitch at that age, but that was exactly kind of the conversation that was had. And I've never seen it since then. We had to watch it at school. And I like the Beauty of the Beast song. The other thing you have to realize with any, obviously Disney is the biggest example, but with any kind of children's TV, there's always these catchy songs, right? Kids hear them, get stuck in their head. They like the music. They may not realize what they're saying, but it's catchy. And that's the whole purpose of socializing a consumer, not just a child, but a consumer, and into wanting to, now it's go buy it on iTunes or something like that. Whereas in the past, when I was growing up, it was go buy the cassette or the CD, and that was the whole point of having that kind of catchy music, because you wanted to hear it more and more. It's a little easier now with YouTube. But, we have this history based on that consumer culture. And now they just have to find different ways of getting it, whether it's McDonald's toys that then lead to you wanting, then to your children wanting and begging for another toy from Walmart or somewhere else.
What was the one, Peter Pan, what makes the red man red? And I have to give Frank Walton, the incredible hip-hop artist who happens to be indigenous, a whole bunch of credit for flipping that song and turning into one of the better songs made in the last few years. But that's what we're dealing with. That's the indoctrination and socialization of all children. And that's the scary thing. These are our children. These are our kids. These are our children, and we have to actually hide them from this stuff, or it's going to affect them.
But there's no way to hide them. That's the thing. You may say it's one thing to not allow something in your home, but schooling, socialization, spending nights with friends, it's not. There's no way. That's why I say it's not even a. When you ban something, it makes kids want to do it more. It's just like teenagers, and it's just like adults. When you say straight out no to something, it makes them want to do it more. So that's why it's easier to have discussions and maybe not even if you can watch it with them, but even if you don't do that, once they come home, like, hey, have a discussion about it. But banning is the worst option because it'll just make them love whatever it is you want them to ban.
So to have I've never had kids or watched kids as a guardian, but so you're saying the solution is don't hide the stuff from them, as long as it's not like, rated R or something and racist, but have a conversation with them after or during the film.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The second you ban any, specifically Americans, but it's not just Americans. I mean, it's the same reason why, the highest teenage pregnancy rate in the United States was 1957, because it was abstinence only was practiced and sex was banned. Mm-hmm. You can't... Humans are rebellious, whether they want to admit to it or not. If you tell somebody, no, they can't do this, especially children, especially teenagers and children, they're going to do everything in their power to do it. And you can't make it that, it just makes it more appetizing to them. Because they want to know what's so hidden, what's so secret, why is it so bad? And then the worst part is as they turn into teenagers, then they want to do everything they can to piss you off as a parent.
Oh, yeah.
That's their only goal in life.
Yeah.
And so that's why, the banning is just the worst option in that case.
And then it turns into a double-edged sword. Daddy, I'm pissing you off by dating a black guy.
Yeah, yeah. There you go. That's a perfect example of where you see that regularly.
It's just all over the place.
It doesn't mean you shouldn't, doesn't mean you should give your kids heroin and shit. It's just you ban them from essentially common things, right?
Cocaine maybe on Saturday nights, but not wait, no, don't do that. Don't do that. We have to take a break because we're going to have an incredible guest coming on, and her name is Jen Deerinwater. She is actually the Establishment's Writer of the Week. She is that talented, and we will be right back after this amazing song by John Two Hawks called Sacred Wind.
Te'ata Ewakan, sacred wind. You are like the great mystery, moving in all places, in all people, in all things. You cannot be seen, yet we feel your presence and see your power in the dancing prairie grass and the flight of the eagle. Whisper to our spirits, help us to find wisdom once again. We are made of earth, fire, water, wind. We share one earth, one sun, and one moon. Let us live together as one people. Help us, great mystery, to mend the sacred hoop, to heal our brokenness, and to find once more our place in the web of life.
Hey y'all, we are back, and one of my best friends, I love her to death. Jen Deerinwater is with us live with my co-host Gal, and Jen is a freelance journalist and a new contributing writer to Wear Your Voice. She's also a speaker and community organizer. Jen, thanks so much for being on Whose Culture.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Indeed, no problemo. Let's get right to it. Now, I brought this question up before the show, just seeing what exactly we would be discussing. And this is something I talk about a lot on the show because as a black person, so much of entertainment, there's not many black people, and if there is, or made fun of. So how tough is it in terms of the lacking representation of the LGBTQ community when you watch movies or television?
It's pretty bad. It's getting a little better, but you often don't see the lived realities of the LGBTQIA2S community. It feels like to me that we've come far enough as a society that, will allow the most privileged of queer folks to be seen on like a TV show or a movie, as long as those characters are willing to conform to white supremacist and capitalist and heterosexist values. It's not often that you see a bisexual character or a trans character or, even a two-spirit who are being portrayed in a positive light. And so that's a serious problem that we have in terms of representation.
And you're absolutely right. It is a serious problem. According to population percentage, and this is a Gallup poll used, and obviously some people, and that's absolutely fine if they don't identify, but these are people who do identify as LGBTQ. 4.1% of the population, so it's 10 million people, and women have a higher identification with that with that label, than men. And looking at the entertainment industry, male characters outnumbered female characters by a ratio of more than 3-1. More than 3/4 of inclusive films, 77% feature gay male characters, while less than 23% included lesbian characters. As for the representation of the rest of the queer community, only 9% included bisexual characters, while only one film was trans-inclusive. That was Warner Brothers' Hot Pursuit. That's 2015, the movies. So when you watch more movies and television than I do, when you see that, I mean, what's your first thought?
Well, it's usually like, oh God, not again. But I think a big part of the reason that we keep seeing queer characters who are predominantly white, able-bodied, well-to-do cis gay men, are because of all of the issues that we have in our society in terms of sexism, misogyny, racism, biphobia, transphobia. Those are really deeply embedded in American society and culture. And so, it's not surprising that in turn, we're going to see the most privileged of queer people being represented on TVs, on TV shows and in movies. And, the people who are predominantly in charge of those industries are also white, cis, able-bodied, well-to-do men. And so it makes sense that they're going to push the shows and the movies out that are going to highlight those kind of characters. It's either 42 or 44%. I can't recall which it is. But, that's how much of those of us who are bisexual make up the queer community. Like, we make up the majority of it. But because we as bisexuals are constantly having to fight just to prove that we exist, that our identity, our sexuality is, it's not fake. It's not just a girl trying to please her man for his birthday. It's not just a state of curiosity or the identity that one takes when they're on the road to becoming gay or lesbian. So, of course you're not going to see those of us who really make up the majority of the community. I can't think of any movies or TV shows short of documentaries that ever featured Two-Spirit people either, which is an ongoing problem that just the Native community as a whole has. We are not represented in Hollywood in any sort of positive light. So, of course, our Two-Spirit community members are not going to be represented either.
That is sad but true. And Native people were at least in terms of documentation, in world history, the first people to realize that there were more than two genders. And yet this is how you guys are treated in Hollywood today.
Mm-hmm.
That does make you go, ugh. I think that's a perfect description. And you talk about bisexual characters, and I know you identify as bisexual. I was reading an LA Times article I'm about to tweet out, and this I'm quoting directly. When there are LGBT characters, you might miss them if you blink. Just looking at the number of LGBT characters on the big screen isn't enough. With 73% of the few queer characters having less than 10 minutes of screen time, their impact is additionally limited.
Mm-hmm.
And they're usually white. 32% of LGBT characters in 2014, people of color. That number dropped to 25% in 2015. And of the LGBT characters counted in 2015, 72% were white. Only 5, and I mean 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people were Latino. And these are the movies that they counted. 4 were black, 3 were Asian, and one character was non-human. Fabian in Lion Gates Ungalo Gan muchos huevos.
Wait, so you're quoting movies? Is that the statistics you're giving on movies?
That is according to LA Times of specific movies that they.
Okay, I'm looking. Well, because we're for anybody who obviously isn't on our chat, which is really just me and Nolan right now. I'm giving statistics of TV at the same time, and I got confused as to why we were getting numbers. Now I see why, different numbers. Because TV is a little bit more represented now. Not much.
A little.
Not much. A little bit more. Like bisexual representations on broadcast rose 30% from 2015 to 2016, up by 10 percentage points. It also rose on streaming series from 20% to 26%. However, cable series have dropped in bisexual representations from 35% to 32%. Bisexual women far outnumber bisexual men on every platform. And as it then goes on, this is from GLAAD. I can put this in the chat as well. This is the yearly report. I actually use it in my classroom from GLAAD on media representation of LGBTQ community. So it's interesting to see where there is some difference. But you're right, with like the movies, I can it's pretty rare.
Yeah, and like I touched on earlier, is that the people who are predominantly in charge of these industries, especially the movie industry, where it's so heavily funded by white men, like that's why you're not seeing a good representation of the entire LGBTQIA2S community, because we don't have the same access to resources, and we're not predominantly the people who are in charge. And I think that something else that's really important to point out is that while, we do need to think about, how many of these characters are queer identified in some way, it's also important that we're making sure that those characters are being accurately portrayed, that, they're not being mocked and relying on lazy stereotypes. And that's a real problem. Like I was sitting here just trying to prepare for this show today. I was sitting and thinking about all the shows I've watched and the way I've seen women and trans folks and bisexuals represented. Once again, there's no representation that I know of Two-Spirit people in film and television outside of documentaries about us. But I was sitting there thinking about it, and almost everything I could come up with was, really biphobic or transphobic for the most part. It was really racist. So it's not just enough to have those characters. We need to have characters that accurately represent our people and our communities. And, right now there's this sort of, I don't know if I'd say it's a resurgence, but there's a reboot, the Will and Grace reboot, and Showtime is talking about doing a reboot of the L Word. And I look at that, as a person who has a lot of different identities that are often overlooked. And I can't help but be angry. So it's like, why are we going to remake shows about predominantly wealthy, able-bodied white folks who are cis and monosexual? Like, why are we doing that? Like, I don't want to take away from the work that those shows have done to get, just our community as a whole sort of visible in mainstream American society. But those shows were not great depictions of queer people in our lived realities. And, so that's really frustrating to me. It's not enough to just have us on the screen. Like, we need to be defining ourselves. We need to be the people in charge of our own narratives.
May I ask if you watched Sense8?
I have not. That's a Netflix show, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I am the faculty advisor for our LGBT group on campus, and that was one that they just adored, and we would talk about regularly. So apparently, and I haven't seen all of it, was pretty decent in representation of race and trans and LGBTQ as a whole. But of course they canceled it just recently, and it had really good ratings, so it brought up a lot of questions as to why Netflix canceled it.
Well, I boycott Netflix, period, because of the way they treat Native people.
Completely.
They have some good shows, but they have been horrible to Native people. So I outright boycott it altogether. Not that there is really any moral or ethical consumption under capitalism, but just because of that, I don't watch it. And there was this one show on the Sci-Fi Channel. I'm drawing a blank. I can't remember it, but the lead character was a succubus, and she was bisexual. And, in a way, they showed the bisexuality in a good light, because it wasn't just, oh, she's bisexual, let's make fun of that. It was just more like that happened to be a part of that character. But I also think on that, and I'm like, well, why does that have to be on a sci-fi show? Why does it have to be a succubus who's bisexual? It kind of implies that bisexuality is slutty and that it's evil. A community member, Miles Joyner, wrote this piece about the portrayal of bisexual characters in vampire movies. And it was really good and really enlightening for me, because I was like, oh yeah, part of why I've liked so many vampire shows is because there usually is some kind of bisexual character, but that character is always a vampire. So we do have this sort of ongoing portrayal that bisexuality isn't real. So even when it is being portrayed in sort of a good way, it's still mostly being put on characters that, are mythical creatures, which continues that idea that bisexuality isn't real, that we don't make up the majority of the community. So it's just this ongoing issue that I see happening across the board.
Lost Girls, the show you were thinking of.
Yes, that's it. Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to bring this up because representation is imperative to marginalized communities. And I just posted on Twitter two pictures. One from the show Transparent, and then another from the movie The Danish Girl. Now, Jeffrey Tambor is now trans, and Eddie Redmayne is not trans. And there are plenty of trans actors who are incredibly talented who could have played those roles, but weren't allowed to. What's your take on that?
Yeah. Well, I haven't watched either of them, and the reason I haven't watched it is because it was cis people, supposedly portraying trans folks, and that's not acceptable. While it's a different issue, it's gender identity rather than race, but to me, seeing someone who is cis playing a trans role is, in a way, it's kind of akin to blackface or redface or yellowface. It's like there are plenty of people in this world who are trained in acting who could be playing that role, who are trans, or who are a person of color or a disabled person. So why aren't we going to those people to do those roles? And what it really comes down to is that the people in Hollywood don't really want accurate representation. They don't want accurate portrayals of trans folks and, people of color, especially queer folks of color. They don't want to see that, because in order to see that, that means that we would have to hold the lens up to all of the transphobia, biphobia, homophobia, and all the other isms and phobias that are alive and kicking in the queer community. I feel like after, so-called marriage equality was passed, a lot of the predominantly, white, well-to-do gay men and lesbians and the straight world just kind of said, well, okay, now every queer person's living a great life because they can get married. And it's like, well, that's just not the case. One, I don't support marriage for a variety of reasons. But it's also it's ignoring the fact that, 61.1% of bisexual women have been abused in our lifetimes. It's ignoring our community's higher rates of drug and alcohol abuse, that queer teens are so much more likely to commit suicide or to become homeless than straight and cis kids are. It's ignoring all of the policy and institutional oppression that gets kicked out by the U.S. government. And it's not just the Republicans doing it. The Democrats do it too. So I feel like if Hollywood really wanted trans actors or bi actors or so forth, they would have to see these problems, and also see us in our own strength and beauty of how we're surviving and thriving in the face of these issues. And, Hollywood doesn't want to see that. America doesn't want to see that. America and Hollywood are lazy, and they're full of hate, and they just want to rely on these messed up ideas of queerness, of gender, of sexuality.
I can't argue with any of that. Can you talk about? And you spoke on the youth in the community, in that community. Can you talk about what that lacking representation on screen does to a young person, both in the LGBT community and young folks who are straight?
Well, it's, if you're not, as a queer person, if you're not seeing yourself portrayed on television or on movies, or you're seeing yourself portrayed in these really negative lights, it can lead to a lot of our kids internalizing transphobia and homophobia and biphobia and so forth. Instead of coming to love who they are and embracing who they are, it can instead have them hating themselves. And that can lead to things like. And then on the flip side, for the kids that are straight and cis, when they're not seeing their peers who are to us portrayed, it goes to lead on to them that, oh, it's not a real thing, that queerness isn't real, or it's something to be afraid of because it's deviant. Speaking as a Native, unfortunately, because of colonization, we've internalized a lot of this hatred that wasn't a part of our communities and our tribal nations. And, I can't tell you how many times I've heard some Native people say that, gayness is a white thing. It's a white man's thing. We don't really have that in the Native community. And, that's just not true. Like you mentioned earlier, a lot of our nations have always had more than two genders. My nation is one of them. But if you don't ever see that being portrayed, you just don't think it's real. You don't think it's a part of your community. You don't think it's a part of your daily life. And then in turn, when you do encounter people, especially for youth who are in the process of coming out or, who are already out, like, you don't know how to behave. So this is so much of, it's not the only reason, but it's a big part of like what leads to bullying and harassment and violence against our queer kids.
That's a good point. That conditioning and indoctrination that Gal was talking about earlier before you came on, that leads to bullying as well. And Gal, I mean, you can speak on that even more, Gal. Go ahead.
With the with the socialization. Well, yeah. I mean, it all goes down to how we socialize into these norms of female versus male, to where even, by the time students are in university, this idea of more than two genders is just so foreign to them. And I use examples specifically of native cultures and the history throughout many different tribes and things like that as an example, in Hijra in India. And it just amazes, I think I find it more fascinating how amazed they are from it, because it's just so out of the norm, of course, because they never see any of these ideas come to light. They never see anything on TV about it or in the movies, and it's just so much of what this next generation, next meaning below mine, but including my own and the one before that, comes around based on what we learn on TV and movies. The media is so important in this.
That's the truth. One thing I definitely wanted to ask you before we let you go, about 10 or so minutes. If you could change one thing in Hollywood, Jen, what would that be?
Just one?
Just
one.
Only one.
We'd all need like one. A 10-day marathon show to say all the things we'd want to change. But if one thing you could change, what would it be?
Oh, goodness. You know what? I'll just go with white supremacy, because I think that's a good one, because, white supremacy is not just about racism. It's also about sexism and ableism and, heterosexism and, the colonization of indigenous people. So, yeah, I'll just go with that. White supremacy. I would change that.
That'll work. Speaking of white supremacy, the whole Harvey Weinstein, just, I don't know if you want to call it a debacle, whatever you want to call it. It's abhorrent. And what are your thoughts on that? Because especially as a Native woman, with the violence towards Native women and women in general, what comes to mind with this situation?
Mm-hmm. At first I was kind of avoiding it, just because I am a survivor of sexual assault and a lot of other violence at the hands of men, predominantly white men at that. So for my own well-being, I was kind of avoiding that story, but I did finally, start looking into it, reading a few articles here and there. And, I can't say I'm surprised by it. Of course I'm disgusted, but I'm not surprised. He's a powerful man. He's a rich man. He's a white man. He's all those things. So, of course, he's going to, assault women and be able to get away with it. And as someone who has worked in fields that are predominantly made up of, like, white cis men, I have my own stories of sexual harassment and threats of violence by men in the music business, which I was once kind of a part of. And then, I worked in politics for years. I mean, the stories I have from all that work are unreal. So I'm not surprised by it. I'm not shocked by it at all. I am really deeply disappointed in all of the people who stood by and said nothing when they saw Weinstein doing all of this abuse to women. There have been plenty of accounts of men, Quentin Tarantino, and Skeet Ulrich are two that come to mind, who said, oh, yeah, we knew that Harvey was doing this, but we just didn't do anything. And that's what really disgusts me. It's one thing as a survivor of assault to stay quiet, because the whole world tells us we're not supposed to talk about this for a variety of reasons. But when you have powerful men who are standing by, or just men in general, who are standing by and watching this abuse, and they're just staying silent, they're complacent at that point. They might as well be the rapist as far as I'm concerned. And, like I had mentioned, I'm bisexual, I'm Native, I'm disabled. Women in all of those communities have staggeringly high rates of victimization, including sexual assault. And so, I look back and I don't know, I'm not surprised, but I'm just disgusted. And I'm really angry with the way that a lot of media is portraying this because, at this point, I think there's 50 women who've come out and talked about how Weinstein assaulted them. But in all of the articles I read, it kept saying alleged. He allegedly assaulted them. And it's, well, how many women does it take for you all to finally believe this man is a predator? Do we have to have 1,000, 2,000? At what point are you just going to finally own up to the fact that this man is a rapist and he's been abusing all of his power and privilege in order to harm women? And, speaking for myself, when you're fighting so hard as a woman, and especially as a woman of color, a queer woman or disabled woman, and so forth, to try to be in this field, whatever that field is, that's predominantly cis man dominated, you often have to just shut up and take the abuse and never talk about it. And that's the unfortunate thing is that it's not just unfortunate that it's happening. It's unfortunate that as a society, the only way women can be in these male-dominated fields is just to be a victim and never fight back in any way. And, Hollywood's no exception to that.
That's a grim reality, to say the least. And I was reading Lupita Nyong'o's words about it, and she says, I was so exasperated by the end that I just kept quiet. Harvey finally accepted my position and expressed that he still wanted to work with me at some point. She would reply, thank you, I hope so. And she says in the article, I lied. So according to The Cut, this is a news outlet, some 29 women so far have shared accounts of harassment and abuse ranging from Ashley Judd, Angelina Jolie, Gwyneth Paltrow, to Asia Argento, Emma Duke-Cons. I hope I pronounced those correctly. So, alleged, get that word out of there.
Well, the problem with that, the reason we can't get that word out of there, just from a legal standpoint, is until convicted, the allegation. That's why. I just want to state that. So media, any decent media is going to stick with alleged in the sense of they will be sued if they don't. I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah. And, as a writer, I get that. You have to say things that are supposedly the facts. And our society is not set up to allow us to openly speak about those facts. You look at the people who do come forth about sexual assault, do they ever see justice in this messed up system? No.
98%.
They don't. They never.
98% of rapists never see a day in jail.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you can't say, oh, well, we need to have a conviction or we can't call this man a rapist or this person a rapist when the fact remains that the people they're raping are never going to see any kind of justice. I can say from my own experiences going to the police when I've been assaulted, they refuse to take a damn report. They wouldn't even take the report.
Yep.
So, how are you supposed to ever get a man convicted if the police won't take a report, if the police are running you off saying it's your fault?
I'm also a survivor. I completely understand that situation and not...
Yep.
Nobody, where the silence comes from. And I found the entire this entire Weinstein situation, from both a survivor's perspective and a sociological perspective, has been interesting in the sense that it has sparked this kind of national conversation that we haven't seen since the 90s. Now, there's so much more that obviously needs to be talked about. I know one day last week when I was on holiday, or as us Americans say, vacation, there was a day where it was like women stay silent on Twitter, and I had a problem with that in the sense that anytime a Native woman and it was because Rose McGowan was suspended when she spoke out, or she had tweeted something. I think it was personal information about somebody. Do you remember this? Does anybody know this from last week? It was when I was gone, but I remember. And at first I was like, oh, okay, I can get behind that. And then after, it took me only like a minute to go, wait a minute. How many Native women do we see, and how many Black women do we see regularly attacked on Twitter, famous or not? And nobody ever gives a shit. But this white woman, whom is, allegedly a survivor, and that's fine, and that has nothing to do with what I'm saying. Why all of a sudden are we, and then silencing ourselves even more? I don't see the message behind silencing ourselves even more when we're already silenced.
Well, then you have go ahead, Jen.
Well, I was going to say, and with Weinstein, a lot of the people who are coming forward, they're not all white, but a lot of them are. So we have to stop and think, how many women of color, how many queer women, how many women with disabilities along the way has he assaulted throughout his life?
And has spoken up. I'm sorry, has spoken up and nobody paid attention to.
Exactly. I mean, it's 84.3% of Native women have been abused in our lifetimes, and 8 out of 10 of our attackers are white men. And that's actually the reverse. Usually for white women, their attackers are white men. But you have so many women being abused. This is not new. I feel like, when we talk about rape on college campuses and, now with Weinstein, it's looking at the white, straight, cis, able-bodied women who've been victimized, because that seems to be the only victims that we care about in this society.
Absolutely agree. There's also been this kind of outpouring. CNN just did a report less than an hour ago on the 7 men who have been accused of sexual harassment since Weinstein being the first one on the list, of course, with more than 40 people. And I was kind of going through it, because it has started to be talked about more, which is a very positive thing. And I'm going to completely agree with you that it is always able-bodied, cisgendered, white, female, where we tend to listen to them as a society. Again, when we say we don't necessarily mean the 3 of us on this call. But the fact that other people are discussing this, I think, is a very positive sense. One person on here, I don't necessarily know his name, is James Toback, and he's a Hollywood screenwriter and director behind films like Bugsy and The Gambler and some really older films from the 90s. More than 200 accusers have come out in 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
More than 200. The Los Angeles Times ran their initial story, and they've had 200 people contact them since with similar encounters. Then they have Ben Affleck. There was one accuser that came out. Not that makes the person any less or more. It was Hillary Burton, a white, able-bodied, cisgendered female. You've got, in politics, George H.W. Bush. Somebody has come out and accused him in this time, the first Bush. An actress as well, Heather Lind, who touched her inappropriately from behind twice and told her a dirty joke. In television, you've got Chris Savino, who was the creator of a TV show on Nickelodeon, who has at least 12 accusers there. He wrote a letter on Facebook saying he's deeply sorry and ashamed. I'm going to post this in a second. It's very interesting to look at. Roy Price, number of accusers, 1, head of the Amazon Studios, who quit 5 days after he was put on leave. I remember that was a week and a half ago, maybe. And then in the media, you've got some Lockhart Steele, the editorial director at Vox Media, who was fired after one accuser came forward. And then John Besh, who is a celebrity chef who stepped down from the company he founded after 25, at least, employees came forward and accused him of sexual harassment. So it is starting a conversation. I've seen other like media conglomerates especially kind of go towards this as a witch hunt idea, but I think the witch hunt really comes down to the victims who have stayed silent for so long. You know, they've been terrified to speak up.
Yeah, and, you know, something else that's really important, you know, I've never acted. I don't know that industry from personal experience, but having been, you know, working in politics for years, you know, I had to sign a lot of non-disclosure agreements, and that really silenced me. You know, there was one particular politician that I had worked for, a candidate I had worked for, that didn't sexually harass me, but they said some really inappropriate things while I worked for them. And so I decided to leave their campaign. And when I spoke out publicly, and all I said was, you know, as a bi, queer, disabled, Native woman, I no longer support this candidate. They threatened me with a lawsuit. You know, so, and, you know, I don't have the money to go to court. I don't have that kind of money. I don't have attorneys in my family. You know, I have working class roots. And so, you know, you have to think about like that. Also, the fear of legal retribution for speaking out against your abuser. And I mean, that's real. And I can't imagine that that's not happening in Hollywood and other industries as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, we have a president who has had at least 19 separate allegations against him. And we know that his, you know, MO is to just bang them with lawsuits, right? Just hit them left and right so that they can't do anything. Even the with the 12-year-old girl that well, when she was 12, and in that case, they sued her into oblivion to where she gave up. And it doesn't mean, you know, people, oh, well, then she must have not been telling the truth. And we hear this all the time regularly with, like, plea deals. Oh, they must have been guilty. No, that's not. Everybody knows how our system works. And if you don't, then you haven't been paying attention. Like, you've got to have money to fight these cases, whether you're innocent, whether you're, you know, a survivor, whether you're telling the truth. You've got to have money in order to secure a lawyer, to secure the time to take off work, to, you know, be able to go to these different cases. It's not as simple as just, you know, oh, they must have been lying. That pisses me off so bad when people say that. Right,
exactly. And it's a re-victimization. You know, it's like you've already been assaulted, you know, literally, but now you're being, you know, sort of metaphorically, and also, I guess, literally to some extent, assaulted again by this person and by the system. You know, so it's really infuriating to watch that. You know, happening and to also know that it's not being talked about. And, you know, I think that, you know, you mentioned earlier, like we're having this narrative now around sexual assault, and that's really important. But when I see only certain voices being elevated, it makes it out as if the only people who are being assaulted are white, cis, well-to-do women, and that's just not the case.
100% agree. There's that, and then the other thing that drives me insane is the hypocrisy behind, you know, we're going to shame Weinstein but support Trump, or we're going to shame this individual and say how bad sexual assault is, but completely be like, oh, Julian Assange is a fucking prophet. I have such a problem with this idea that certain people, certain victims, you know, oh, well, this person's too important, so who cares what they did, or something along those lines. It drives me up the fucking wall. Anybody sees my Twitter should know. I've been talking like this all day. I went through 3 classes talking like this. It's been great.
Yeah, when this presidential election was still happening, I remember there was this back and forth of you know, oh, well, Bill Clinton's a rapist, like, and, you know, so it's okay if Trump is, or, you know, we shouldn't, you know, if we're anti-Trump, then we must be pro-Clinton. And it's like, well, no. You're right. Bill Clinton is a rapist. I can't stand him any more than I can stand Trump. You know, it doesn't matter what party you're a part of. It doesn't matter where your politics fall. If you're assaulting people, then you're a predator, and that's the end of it.
And even within that, it went right back to blaming the woman, the wife in that situation.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, and I mean, I'm no fan of Hillary Clinton, but yeah, I mean, that was it. It was like, well, why can't you keep your man in check? You're not a good woman. And it, you know, it's just going back on all these really sexist and misogynistic ideas of gender. And, you know, we can't have that.
we can't, and it needs to stop. And I hope we can find a genie so we can grant Jen's wish of getting rid of white supremacy in Hollywood, because that would basically solve most of the problems in Hollywood. And I want to thank you so much, Jen, for being on Who's Culture. I love you, and I will probably talk to you later today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Nolan. Thank you, Gal. I really appreciate you having me on and everything y'all had to say. And I love you too, Nolan.
All right. Take care. Talk soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
That was the incredible Jen Deerinwater. You can follow her on Twitter at Jen Deerinwater, JenDeerinwater, Jen Deerinwater, and you can read her incredible writing on the establishment.co. She's also the Establishment's Writer of the Week this week. You can check her out on Medium, Bitch Media. She is all over the place, and it's all good and all great. I learned so much from her, just being her friend and also reading the great stuff that she writes. And there's a story that I remember hearing about the other day, and the story goes that there are, what was it, 4 women? There were in British Columbia. This is a part of the missing and murdered Indigenous women. There were already women who were missing. They found the remains of in a place where other women who were missing, went missing. So, and this story has not been picked up by anybody in the American media mainstream. I'm trying to find the article. Oh, here's one, another one. 3 women have gone missing from North Algonquin area since 2016. Their names: Caitlin Potts, Deanna Wirtz, and Ashley Simpson. All Native women. And who cares? We're only going to worry about white women with Weinstein.
Yes.
And we
That's what we call white women syndrome. There's an actual academic term for that. That is very common, that we even with Amber Alerts, we tend to get white children. We don't get as many, even when Black children, Native children, Hispanic children, you don't generally get as many Amber Alerts. It's not every single time a child goes missing. And think about the, bigger cases that we'll see on TV that gain so much attention, whether it's Casey Anthony or Natalie Holloway, or it's amazing the amount of people of color that are just completely ignored because they don't fit that stereotype that the idea is media doesn't pick it up because the majority just wouldn't care. And that's the reason that's been given for such a situation. And we see it all the time with Indigenous women in Canada and in America going missing just at ridiculous percentages compared to any other nationality or race, and with hardly a word ever said about them.
I've heard up to 4,000, it's probably more than that, missing and murdered Indigenous women in the U.S. and Canada. There are over 60,000 missing Black women and girls in the United States. Obviously, there's population disparity because there are close to 40 million Black people in the United States. According to the census of the United States, there are under 5.5 million Native people. So in terms of the numbers, Native women are assaulted more than any other race in the country or in North or South America. And who cares? That's the narrative that we keep hearing from not hearing about it. And I can only imagine, as we heard Jen talk about it, it's enraging. I can only imagine as a Native woman what that feels like, especially as a survivor. And thank you again, Jen, for being on the show and being on Who's Culture. And I think we're going to lighten the mood now because it's time for our new segment, Gal. Who are we kicking out of Hollywood this week? On
Is it too simple to go with Weinstein?
Well, yeah, you could. I thought about that. I'm like, that's too easy.
That's okay because I got more. I'm ready.
Okay, good. So hit us.
All of the idiots that stood up for him over the last 2 weeks. Woody Allen, first of all, should have been out of Hollywood long ago. Okay, and the fact that he fucking came out and was like, we shouldn't be treating Weinstein this way, coming from a man who is accused of molesting a small child, who we also know, married his young wasn't technically stepdaughter, his girlfriend's daughter. It's just, not happening. Woody Allen, sorry, you should have been kicked out back in the 70s.
So Woody Allen, bye-bye. It's about time. That whole thing is just, with him, it's just disgusting and seedy, and he's such a little, he's such a little man in every sense of the word.
Yeah.
Like, just get out of here, Woody. Get out of here, Woody. You're out of Hollywood. For me, I'm also going to go with a white male, shockingly enough. I am kicking out Seth Meyers from Hollywood.
Okay, I don't know why. I don't really care. I just wanted to do the.
That's good. That's good. That's good.
I'm not a fan, so.
That was good adding to it. That was good. That was very good for entertainment purposes. But I am kicking Seth Meyers out because I am absolutely sick of this hypocrisy from liberals. And himself, he has continually gone after Trump, which he should, because Trump is awful and the son of Satan. But at the same time, you had Hillary Clinton on your effing couch laughing with her, chuckling it up. Like, it's all good. Hillary's cool. And I watched the episode. I didn't watch the whole thing. I couldn't stomach it, to be honest with you. But I watched part of the episode before the election when she was on. And first of all, Hillary Clinton's laugh is both terrifying and annoying. I just want to get that out of the way. But Hillary and Seth laughing together. Hillary's on his couch. Hillary's talking about how Bill would have been a great first gentleman. And as we were just talking about Bill Clinton, most likely a rapist, but he'd be a great first gentleman. Yeah, that makes absolutely no sense. So Seth Meyers humanizing a white supremacist who is responsible for as much deaf people of color as anyone in modern times you can think of. But it's driving me crazy.
He did the same thing with Trump as well. The next night.
Did he have Trump on?
Yeah, that's when he lost that. That's when I didn't give a shit about him. If you're going to sit there and human,
I didn't know it was
Seth Meyers did it as well.
Gee whiz. Can I kick him out twice? Can I kick him out and then pull him back in and then kick him out again?
That's okay, because I was actually going to kick out somebody we've already kicked out anyway. That's my next one.
So I'll do it.
Matt Damon.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't you kick him out last time?
Yeah, well, he's on my list.
Yeah, he's on my list too, but here's why he's on my list again. Says he knew about Harvey Weinstein's alleged sexual harassment of Gwyneth Paltrow and still worked with him.
Still work with him.
Said he never talked about it with Gwyneth Paltrow during their production of The Talented Mr. Ripley, which was Weinstein. So it didn't, he had always...
Why would you admit that in the first place?
And this was on NBC's Today, so he admitted it on TV.
Oh, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit. Megyn Kelly.
Yeah, I don't know who.
She's the host of Today.
Yeah.
Megyn Kelly. Yeah.
God.
Yeah, she
There's
said.
a few hosts of today, though.
Well, yeah, you have the this, I don't know what it's, the white soccer mom show with Kathy Lee Griffin and the other woman. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what the show is or segment. That confused me as a child. Like you'd have Mad and Al Roker and all that stuff, and then all of a sudden Kathy Lee's there. I'm like, what are we talking about? And they say some of the stupidest things you'll ever hear in your life. Yet they have a show and are making millions of dollars. Shocking. But yeah, Matt Damon is disgusting. He should have been left on Mars to die. And if anybody gets the reference, just making sure. Well, and then there's the Megyn Kelly.
Oh, wait, I'm going to kick somebody else out real quick. Lindsay Lohan.
Lohan, I have no real love for her, but why Lohan?
Her quote was, "I feel very bad for Harvey Weinstein right
now.
I don't think it's right what's going on to him. He's never harmed me or done anything to me. We've done several movies together, and so I think everyone just needs to stop. I think it's wrong."
Jeez, man. I'm a guy, so I'm not gonna hit a woman, but you kick her out hard. You that hard right foot.
Another woman who stood up for him is Donna Karan, who is a fashion designer, and she said, "You look at everything all over the world today and how women are dressing and what they are asking by just presenting themselves the way that they do. What are they asking for? They're asking for trouble. To see it here in our own country is very difficult, but I also think, how do we display ourselves? How do we present ourselves as women?" So, yeah, she's blaming the women because, men just can't help themselves.
I'm so sick of that narrative. It's the same shit with racism. BS excuses.
They were raised that way.
Well, you shouldn't have been driving a car. If you got killed by the cops, so you shouldn't have been driving. You shouldn't be out of your house. I'm widening the line of their nonsense because usually it's what.
Yeah.
Well, you
comply or die.
You could have been reaching for something, even though you didn't have a weapon. It's the same mess. It's white supremacy. It's the whole thing. It's the whole ball of wax. And speaking of white supremacy, Megyn Kelly. Unless you have anybody else that let's make
No.
Megyn Kelly's
We just
out.
throw Megyn Kelly in it.
We'll kick
Bill
her out.
O'Reilly.
We'll kick them both out. We'll kick them both out as well. But this feud between them, I don't really know what to make of it because they're both horrible people. They're both racist. They both worked for, one worked for, and the other now gets his show back, worked for a network that has to now put out a disclaimer saying they're not actually news. So, yeah, you are the woman on this show. I'm right now. There's two people. You're the woman, so I'll let you start us off here.
I don't know what you're talking about with Megyn Kelly, to be honest. I know the Gretchen Carlson situation.
You haven't heard. Well, apparently Megyn Kelly and Bill O'Reilly are fighting with one another. Kelly says to O'Reilly, the silencing of women has to stop. Bill O'Reilly is sticking with his absolute disgusting nature. O'Reilly says, "I don't know why Kelly is doing what she's doing. I've helped her so dramatically in her career." And apparently there was some sexual harassment between, we know him and many women at Fox, and he is denied any wrongdoing, of course, even though he got fired for it, for goodness sake.
And paid out a huge settlement, $32 million.
$32 million.
So let's go to that situation. When you can afford to pay $32 million, that means you can afford to fight it in court if you're innocent. I'll go with that one.
Yeah. Yeah, that's disgusting. what could you say, and you can please correct me if you can't, but can some people afford to rape?
Absolutely. All they got to do is pay to silence. And that's what we've seen for so long in these situations with Weinstein and O'Reilly and Bill Cosby and Trump and Clinton. And I mean, you can go through, if you've got the money to silence people, then they're less likely to stand up, especially if you're like, oh, well, I'll pay you to be quiet on this. Or if somebody does bring that lawsuit or brings accusations, Fox just throws $32 million at them to silence them, fire Bill O'Reilly, and then hire him back.
Hired him. I shouldn't say I can't believe it. I need to stop saying I can't believe things, but jeez, man. I mean, the other networks, MSNBC, CNN, they're utter trash. Utter trash.
Right, but they're nothing compared to Fox.
Exactly.
Nope. I agree with you 100%. Utter trash, but nothing compared to Fox.
How do you let him back in?
Look how long they were ran by Roger Ailes, who also himself had all the accusations against him.
That's true.
So it's just the rape culture in general. And we see this, again, in so many different areas. The 7 men that I named from that CNN article that I tweeted out is you had people from dining, you had people from TV, you had people from movies, you had people from the media in general. If you can afford to pay off settlements, if you can afford, and especially if you know your victim can't afford to fight it, can't afford to take you to court, then absolutely they can, it's just another day in their lives. It's just another dollar.
That's just terrifying. I mean, it really is. It really is.
We see the same thing within police departments, right? We see how many times police departments, I mean, even if you want to bring it on even more to domestic violence, where police have twice as high rates of domestic violence within their families, we also see how many cases, at least once a day anymore, I see cases of, the NYPD would be the best one. More recently, there was a case, 2 separate cases in the last 2 weeks of being accused of pulling somebody over and then exchanging, giving them a ticket or charges and then exchanging sex and taking it back. And that's actually, we hear about it all the time. Anybody who's involved in, police accountability research, how often that actually occurs. It's that same kind of, the whole point is the power versus, somebody who feels that they are powerful, whether it's with money, whether it's because they're a boss, whether it's because they're a teacher and a student. So I know that's what we don't talk about enough either, is women who take advantage of the situation as well for men. It doesn't happen as much, but it absolutely does happen. We think of other cases of women teachers who do this with young boys. Something else that tends to get glazed over that should absolutely be discussed. So it's that whole sense of somebody who feels, and what a lot of people don't realize is when it comes to sexual assault, specifically rape, is it's not a crime about sex. It's a crime about power, having complete power over somebody. That's what it comes down to. And that is the amount of research that's been done on having these discussions with rapists, convicted rapists. In my deviance and crime class, they're getting ready to read an article of convicted rapists in their own words, and they're it has so much to do with that having power over another individual. It's not necessarily about sex. It's just that pure power. And when you have money involved, then we know for sure power, money go hand in hand.
That is true. The power of let's put it back to the core, the power of white supremacy. I tweeted it last night in terms of racism. We just want our freedom. White people just want to keep their power. It's that simple. And when you look at men and women and people in the LGBTQ community, men just want to keep their power. The other side just wants to be treated equally. I mean, it's so encompassing, all encompassing. It's in the same circle in terms of white supremacy in Western society. racism, bigotry, transphobia, homophobia, sexism, ableism, etc. But also, it's so simple to stop. Just pay women the same amount of money for the same job. Why are we even having this discussion?
Because so many people still believe that they are paid the same amount. Even, that's the whole science is bullshit argument we hear. Oh, that's one of the ones where I'll tell you, as a teacher, that's the one that will get more students speaking up against the facts that I'm presenting. Well, I saw that that's a lie, the wage gap. Well, here, I saw this YouTube video, or I saw on Fox News. I'll never forget that one.
Oh.
Especially after spending the whole semester talking about why we don't pay attention to CNN, Fox, and MSNBC, and showing proof.
Right.
But that's the one that I'll get the most pushback on, and I've had to actually bring these different studies in and show just multiple studies and go, okay, here you go. But it's always interesting me, the pushback on the wage gap, because of the way popular culture has taken it, and it's, the way that it's spun by different organizations in popular culture and media.
Yeah, Fox News. I looked at a couple articles I asked a friend to send me, because he told me, hey, did you knew that Fox actually has to put out a disclaimer now because they lost in court that they're not really news? And I'm like, really?
They haven't.
I know they're that bad, but I'm like,
they haven't been registered with the FCC as news since the early 2000s. They haven't had to be registered as news. The main thing is because, and CNN and MSNBC the same way, they aren't registered as news. They're registered as entertainment. But now Fox actually has to put that they're not news because of that lawsuit.
Mm-hmm. Which is that's ridiculous. They should be banned off the air right there. After that court case, that should have been the end.
And then they'll just yell freedom of speech, right?
Yeah, right.
It's just like having Richard Spencer talk at colleges.
And then you have the arrests with gunmen and all that. But there's no danger or anything.
Yeah, let's not even talk about, that got so glazed over in the media, didn't it? This news, I didn't see, I barely caught that on one, I think it was even a tweet. It wasn't even a news article. And I was like, what the fuck is this? I haven't even seen anything about this. Was it 3 neo-Nazis arrested while he was there? Yeah.
Well, they're not terrorists. You see.
Oh, of course they're white.
I am a terrorist. I'm a black identity extremist.
Yes, I know. I informed you of that.
Yes, you did. I'm going to the tattoo shop tonight. Put on my chest. Pac had thug life. Yeah, I'm not about that life. I grew up in privileged neighborhoods with white people, so I'm not a thug. But I'm a black identity extremist, so I'm gonna get that tattooed on my chest. Might as well, at least. But that's the fantasy that we live in. Like you were saying about children's movies and how Jen was talking about the misrepresentation or lacking of representation in Hollywood of the LGBT community, and especially talking about Native people who in that community. They don't exist in Hollywood, even though they were the first ones to go, hey, there are more than 2 genders, and you can like men or women or different gender, and you can be of any gender. Yes, that exists, and we're going to treat all those people equally, and actually respect them even more than other people because of that, how unique and special they are. But no, we're not going to have them in any movies. They don't exist. It's not a thing. And my own favorite show, like that threshold that we tinker with, Gal and I, The Simpsons, inherently anti-native. It's absolutely horrendous how anti-native they are. And it's been going on, for years and years and years and years. And I still watch the show, not as much as I used to because the quality is dipped. And also because not as much as I used to because I've probably said this on the show before, but they had a whole episode where the Superintendent Chalmers, He took Bart aside. He said, "Look, Skinner can't handle you. I'm gonna handle you, boy. I'm gonna turn your life around." And he said, "I'm gonna do that by teaching you about Teddy Roosevelt." And I'm watching that, going, "Excuse me? You're gonna teach him about what? Who, what, where, and why? What are you gonna do?" The same man who said the only good Indians are the dead Indians? Are you serious? That's the man you want to teach that child about how to be a better person? The man who said, "I don't go so far as to think the only good Indians are the dead Indians." Oh, he tinkered with his own quote. "But I believe 9 out of every 10 are. The most vicious cowboy has more moral principle than the average native." I'm not going to use the I word again. And the Simpsons think that Teddy Roosevelt is a cool dude. So, what are we left? That's something. What was it? The show on Netflix actually had trans people on it. They take it off.
Yeah, since 8.
Since 8.
I watched the beginning of it, first season I think it was, and it was well done. I got to give him that. I think that what I did, I can see part of it. It was a very expensive show to make because it was all over the world. It was representative of so many different people and cultures, and sexualities and genders. And that was their excuse, was that it cost too much money. But so many people were upset, obviously, because it was one of the shows that was good with representation.
Right, it's too much money, even though they gave Adam Sandler a 4-year movie deal, and that one of those movies, as Jen kind of referred to, was The Ridiculous Six, one of the most racist movies in modern times. It's the most anti-Native movie you could see, but they don't have enough money.
Right.
To keep the show about transgender people on the air or on the internet or whatever. I'm old. I just turned 30, people. So
you're so old, Nolan.
I don't know what to say with certain things and lingo anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, you're so old. I'm only 15. I didn't
finish my birthday cheesecake last night. It's still
happy birthday.
So thank you. I'm 29. I'm going to just say that. I'm not turning
30. I've been 29 for like a decade.
Yes, so we were joining each other to stay 29 until we're dead. Stay in the 20s. I have gray hair because, I used to think George Clooney was cool, so I keep it like this.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Who's on my list if you go to my moments.
I know, I've seen your list.
Yes. And Tim, our producer, who's also the producer and the main host of the People's Weekly on People's Radio United on Fridays at 12. Was it 12 o'clock every Friday Pacific time? He was saying, "I'm going to make a list. It's pretty dang long," and I'm thinking, well, yeah, my list is people I used to think were cool who are white celebrities.
Oh shit. Lindsay Lohan's off my list then because I never thought she was cool.
Yeah, see, well, you can have it. We have different parameters. This is my particular list. So if you want to make a list of racist white celebrities, we're going to be here for a long time. And there's a man who has an airport about a half hour from me that I've flown out of, John Wayne Airport.
Oh, God, don't even get me started on John Wayne.
He said himself, he is was a white supremacist, but he gets an airport. He got an airport, ladies and gentlemen. That's how normal, I'm telling you, that's how normal this is. This is John Wayne. I'm quoting him. Pilgrim. Yeah. With a lot of blacks, I can't. Every time we're called blacks, I'm like, are we a family? Maybe it's just me. It just drives me crazy. It's like, hey, the blacks are coming over to dinner, guys. Make sure everything's clean in the house. The blacks are coming over. It's like we're one big family. Anyways, call us black people. It's not that hard, whatever. Anyways, I've had enough angry rants on the show. Quoting John Wayne, with a lot of blacks, there's quite a bit of resentment along with their dissent, and possibly rightfully so. But we can't all of a sudden get down on our knees and turn everything over to the leadership of the blacks. Okay, see that does sound like you're talking about a family there. I'm just saying. Anyways, I believe in white supremacy. This is John freaking Wayne quoting him directly. I believe in white supremacy until the blacks are educated to the point of responsibility. Responsibility. I don't believe in giving authority and positions of leadership and judgment to irresponsible people. Don't you you lived in America, John? What are you talking about? America was formed by people who had authority and positions of leadership and had judgment that was irresponsible, and they were irresponsible people. What is John Wayne talking about? He is an airport in Orange County, California. That was my only point.
No, I want to vomit now. Thank you.
So we started the show off with me ranting, and we're going to apparently end the show with me ranting, and Gal's going to throw up, and Tim's going to make a list, and it's not even Halloween, let alone Christmas time. So who's naughty and nice in Hollywood? There's a list. We should do that on Christmas. We do a Christmas.
Yes.
Show. Who's naughty? Who's nice? Let's do that. Let's keep the fans happy. Let's at least try to.
Ooh, Halloween is next week. Public service announcement. How about you don't dress as a native princess?
Please don't. LeBron James's wife, don't do it again.
Just don't. Just don't do it.
It's easy. You just don't.
Right. It's not hard. If you understand why not to dress in blackface, as the majority of people do, they may not agree with it, but they at least understand it, even the white supremacists. Mm-hmm. Then you understand that's the same idea. Stop appropriating native culture. Stop sexualizing it.
Amen. Though not all people don't dress in blackface. Angelina Jolie, true. We said Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, and I'm kicking her out. I'm gonna kick her out next week, so I have some ammo left. Sarah Silverman, she can stay.
Did you see her? She's got a new Netflix show, and I gave it a chance for the first episode. Have you seen it yet?
I've
okay.
Not seen it.
Let's save that for next week. I'm going to make you watch at least the first episode, and then we can bitch about it.
Then see, Sarah. I'm leaving you in Hollywood until next Wednesday. Yelm will rip you to shreds, and because I don't believe in violence against women, for men. Gal is going to beat you down and ship you back to whatever European country you came from.
I'm not going to lie. I think she could take me. But I'll try.
She's kind of skinny. I mean, she's tall, though. She's lengthy. She'd probably be a good small forward on a YMCA team, basketball team. I don't know who'd win in that fight. But we'll get gear from the People's Weekly and Top Gear Live to back you up. That way, we make sure that Sarah is on that boat back to I don't care, Belgium,
Israel.
She's Jewish, so yes,
Israel.
Yes, Israel. Gal Gadot as well. Get her out of here. Send her back.
We'll do.
See, we could go on for a long time with this. So that's why we're trying to keep it down to 1
Right. I know when you were like, hey, and I'm like, well, no. Oh, I just thought of 5 off the top of my head. This won't be hard.
There's a show tonight from a wonderful man that is on the People's Weekly every Friday on People's Radio with Gal, myself, and Tim, called The View Up Here. The View Up Here. It's on Blog Talk Radio tonight. Canadian Glenn. Wonderful gentleman. He's one of those folks that he just happens to be white. He's a great guy. If we could clone folks like Glenn and let them be the main populace in white society, we'd be on easy street. Love Glenn. Check out the view up here tonight on Blog Talk Radio. But we are just about out of time, aren't we, Gal? For Who's Close?
are.
Give any parting words or shots for anybody?
Not any shots. I've only really watched one thing this week, or even like new, and it's Mindhunter, and I'm not.
Mindhunter. That's
It's
interesting.
It is.
Mindfucker.
It's got some racial connotations, but it's along the time period, and that's what they're showing. But that doesn't okay it. But it's a different. It's showing 1977, and it's based on John Douglas, who was the first criminal profiler in the FBI. So it is interesting. It was just showing how the behavioral unit in the FBI got set up early on, which is interesting, of course, to me, because that is kind of what all of my studies were on originally. Plus they also mention, sociological theory, and I made my class watch it the other day.
And Tim,
it validated me. Hollywood.
Hollywood. Oh, Hollywood. Tim, our producer, is saying that 1977 is racist. Absolutely right. You cannot find a year in this country before white people got here that it was not racist. And I'll say, this is my parting shot, the FBI, the Fuckboys Institute. Is that what the FBI stands for?
I think so.
I think so. We'll go with that. We'll end the show with that. Fuckboys Institute. Visit the J. Edgar Hoover Fuckboys Institute building in Washington, D.C. while you're out there, guys, ladies and gentlemen. It's a piece of Americana, American history. Okay, we're going to get out of here and go our separate ways, and we'll talk to you next week. And we'll have another angry and informative show for you then. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.